And I want to start by introducing our presenter, who is my partner, and that's none other than Peter J. Strauss. And we're very happy to have Peter as part of our firm. He joins us, and he won't mind me saying this, but last week he celebrated his 87th birthday. And Peter is one of the people that I learned elder law and special needs planning from many, many years ago. And he's been teaching lawyers across New York State for a number of decades. And he's going to introduce our next presenter. So if we could keep our conversations down, please. Peter.
Thank you, Lou. Working keeps the brain alive. That's the 87-year-old part. So Valerie has so much to present. I'm going to keep this very short, but I do want to tell you where I think she fits into this world. I've known Valerie probably for 25 years. We met soon after she became the director of the Evelyn Frank Legal Services Program, then based at Self-Help Community Services and now part of NYLAG, and it's absolutely an amazing organization. You can read a little bit about her personal background in the materials. I just want to put it in a broader perspective. There's a photo that you know, Valerie and I at an Evelyn Frank Legal Services Program, which I think
where we are,
dates it.
Peter.
Okay. Well, I wasn't going to tell you why. I did get an award from Evelyn Frank Legal Services, but today the awards really go to Valerie. And I want to put it in the context and do it fairly quickly. As I was thinking about what to say, I ran across a most fascinating book called Cause Lawyers and Social Movements. A cause lawyer is someone who dedicates her or his career to trying to move government forward, develop policies with not-for-profit organizations, and you know in what, environmental law, civil rights, same-sex marriage, immigration, consumer rights, and healthcare. And Valerie has really been one of the thought leaders and cause attorneys that have molded change in health law through the courts, through advocacy, through education. And she's been in the forefront of that. And without going into some of the accomplishments she's had, she is our thought leader in the elder law and special needs section of the State Bar and many other organizations. And this movement of cause lawyers all arose out of the Roosevelt New Deal, and it lasted through the Reagan administration. But suddenly we have this cause lawyers representing resentment of what we've accomplished under the liberal leadership in this country. But I don't think that's going to stop Valerie. She is going to continue, notwithstanding that we now have cause lawyers on the far right that she will have to start dealing with, as well as in government, but she's not going to stop. And she has the understanding, the sympathies, the effectiveness as an advocate, both in education and in the courts. And she is now going to prove what I have said to be true. So I give you my friend, Valerie Bogart.
Thank you, Peter. Hello, everyone. Hello, everybody remotely. And it's great to be here in person. It's my first time being back at the conference in person. And it's a joy that we can do this now and be together. A little bit is, I love this picture because we honored Peter. Uh-oh, I'm going the wrong way. Yeah, time for a coffee break. We honored Peter at least 10 years ago for all the work he's done in elder law. So I'm going to be presenting some updates. I could talk for about 3 hours. There's so many changes going on, but Lou doesn't want me to, and I don't think you want me to either. So I do work for the New York Legal Assistance Group. We're a nonprofit in New York City. We're focused on the city, but in our policy work, we really do statewide policy. And my own unit that I'm director of is the Evelyn Frank program. And we focus on the issues we're talking about today, healthcare and long-term care. And we do it through training programs like this and a lot of individual case representation. We have a staff of 10 who are all terrific. And we also maintain this website along with the Legal Aid Society Empire Justice Center that I really hope you take a look at, nyhealthaccess.org, with a lot of up-to-date information. So today I'm going to focus on 3 topics. One is what's happening now with the end of the public health emergency that I think is literally ending today. It's but it has a big impact on Medicaid, and that I want people to understand. The good news about the new income and resource expansion that passed in last year's budget, and that is now in effect. And then not so good news about our what we're seeing with the New York Independent Assessor system that the State Department of Health rolled out about a year ago, and we don't think is going so well. Just pointing out a few things we're not going to talk about because they're now delayed for about a year. And there's too much to talk about that's happening right now. And that is another change that was enacted into state law to raise the threshold of who qualifies for MLTC and for personal care and for CDPAP to people who need help with 3 activities of daily living, or 2 if you have dementia. That is, I really want to make it clear, this is not in effect yet, even though unfortunately it looks like some of the administrators and the independent assessors think it is in effect. It's not in effect. I want to make that clear. It won't go in effect for at least a year. The other thing that's not in effect is the 30-month look back. We've always had a look back for nursing home care of 5 years. And back in 2020, they enacted a look back that would be for MLTC and for all personal care and CDPAP and for the assisted living program. And that is not in effect either for at least a year. All right, so there's a lot of misinformation on that. So now you can apply, if so you're a new applicant, you're seeking MLTC enrollment, you apply for Medicaid, they can't ask you for 30 months of bank records. That's not happening now. And there's no transfer penalty if you transferred assets last month for these home and community-based services. So I just want to make that clear that we're not going to dig into that. But let's touch on the unwinding. You may have heard this word in the news. It's been covered on radio and TV. What is the unwinding? Well, what they're unwinding is when COVID first happened, remember those early days, March 2020, Congress passed some laws to deal with the emergency. And one of those laws was a Family First law that gave billions of dollars to states for their Medicaid programs to be able to work and fight COVID, right? We needed money going into the healthcare system. But that money had a string. And that string was no state was allowed to cut off Medicaid for anyone who had it at that moment or anyone who got it since then. So once they called it the continuous coverage requirement. So even if that person who was eligible when they applied got a job later that would have raised their income above the Medicaid limit, or inherited some money, or, you know, just for various reasons was no longer eligible, they could not be cut off. We had just like a little moment for 3 years of sort of universal health care. If you qualified for Medicaid initially. So that party is over. It's ending. And we call it the unwinding of the continuous coverage requirements. But it doesn't just end like that. People can't just lose their Medicaid like that. And it's going to be a process, which I'm going to talk about. At the same time, people with a spend down and people who are over age 65 or have disabilities, they may have qualified for Medicaid with a spend down. Normally, their spend down goes up if their income goes up. That didn't happen during these 3 years. No one's spend down changed. So again, there's an unwinding of that. So what's happening now is that starting this month, every Medicaid program in the state started sending out renewals. All right. But let's just first talk about applicants. What is the changes for applicants? You may not have realized this, but for the last 3 years, it's been much easier to apply for Medicaid. Because that's also some of these COVID easements that they wanted to encourage people to get Medicaid. And some of these easements were, you didn't have to document every bank statement and every pension statement. They took your word for it. You wrote on the application, my pension's $1,500 a month. They'd say, okay. And they couldn't ask you for documentation. And this goes back to the very early part of COVID, when honestly, the banks were closed. I mean, think about old elderly people. They're not online as much. I don't mean to generalize, but a lot of people are not. They rely on going to the bank. They rely on getting things by snail mail. The mails were disrupted. Everything was disrupted. So because of that, they just made it easier. You didn't need to gather all that documentation. Well, those rules have continued until they're ending July 1st. After July 1st, applications for Medicaid will require all the documentation they used to require. So that's a reminder. But the good news is that because we have higher asset limits now, an individual is allowed to have 30,000 and change, and the bank, it's almost double what it was last year. And the income limits are up. Even though people need to document it, many more people will be eligible. So that's a reminder. So what does this unwinding mean? Well, first, let's take a look at, my goodness, there are over 9 million New Yorkers getting Medicaid and the related programs, the Essential Plan, Child Health Plus. That is up 2 million people from the beginning of the pandemic. So it's half of New Yorkers. It's sort of staggering, right? So we think about the aged and the blind and the disabled and this group, but they're not all, right? In fact, most of these people are not. They're families and kids and young singles. So let's focus on how many are in sort of our world, the world of the aged, blind, and disabled. Well, that's 1.3 million. It's still a lot. And all those people have to go through this unwinding. They have to go through a renewal, and their renewals are processed by the local districts. That's what they call the Medicaid office in Chautauqua County and Chemung County, right? Those counties have Medicaid office doing their, so 1.3 million people are starting to get their renewals from their counties. And just to take a step back, that's only, there's 5.3 million who get Medicaid on New York State of Health. Those, I don't know about you, but those are mostly not my clients, because my clients are all 65 and over or disabled. But many 5.3 million people on Medicaid are not. They're younger. They don't have Medicare, and they get it on NYSO, New York State of Health, and they all will have to go through renewals this year because they're going through the unwinding too. Now, there is like a little tricky group that in the footnote here, there are people who used to not have Medicare, used to not be over 65, but in 3 years, 86,000 aged into Medicare or got Medicare because of disability. So there are special provisions happening for them and where their Medicaid is handled. And that's more detail than I can go into today. But so here's like the basic timeline. The federal government has given a tough requirement to all states. They say, you have to, all those 9 million people, you've got to redetermine their Medicaid, have them go through a renewal, and that's got to be done in 12 months. So think if you ran Medicaid, let's see, divide 9 million by 12 months. Oh my heaven, that's about 800. What is it? It's I can't even do the math. It's almost 1 million a month of renewals to process. That's a lot. So because it's so much, the federal government is giving the state some more easements, some ways to make it a little easier on the state, easier on the counties. But my main focus, I want it to be easier on the government too, but also to prevent people from losing Medicaid, even though they're eligible. So the nightmare of my office that we're dreading, that used to happen before COVID, is we just hear, we get the call, mom's home care stopped. Why? I don't know, it just stopped. We dig, we find out that mom didn't return her renewal. Why? Because she's buried in mail and marketing mail from all the Medicare plans and all the Medicaid plans. Who can tell what's the renewal and what's all the other, crap that's deluging everyone's mailboxes, right? And this stuff for our clients, the aged, blind, and disabled, those renewals are still paper. It's a piece of mail. And it's so easy to miss that important mail, right? And that's why I'm sharing this. It's all to all of us, in all of our organizations, to make sure people know, all right, you got to be looking for that sometime in the next year. You are getting your renewal and you have to process, you have to return it with its documents, because otherwise you lose your Medicaid. And what happens if you're relying on home care and you lose your Medicaid? The home care stops. You get kicked out of your MLTC plan or your waiver program. So that's the main message I wanted to get across. Now, no one can be discontinued until July. That's in a few months. And that's only after they've gone through a renewal. So that person who got their job a year ago and really isn't eligible for Medicaid, they won't be cut off on July 1st. They'll be cut off after they go through their renewal and they show, now I'm making more money than Medicaid allows, and they'll lose their Medicaid. And that's right for them, right? But I'm worried about our clients who are still eligible, who will just miss the renewals. So the state is building in some protections for them. And some of this is required by the federal government. like, let's say the renewal gets returned to your county, Schenectady County gets the, moved. Well, there are special procedures that the county has to follow up on return mail. And they have to look into databases and say, well, we know what the person's social security is from a database. We don't need that from them, right? So there's certain things, and I think I can share, even though we haven't seen it in writing yet, that and this set of renewals, they're not even going to look at bank accounts and assets. They're just going to look at income. So that's a big deal. All of this is to make it easier to keep people on Medicaid. So there's a few more things that I'm not going to go into because we don't have enough time, but when you get the slides online, you can see. Another thing is states got special permission from the feds during this time to just postpone a lot of fair hearings. I forget, there's some huge number, 50, 100,000, I don't remember how many hearings are just sitting because they couldn't schedule them all. And they had to get special permission for that because there's regulations that say you got to hold hearings in 90 days. That's the rule. So they got special permission to say, all right, New York, you don't have to, you can still delay scheduling your hearings because you're catching up. But here's the catch. Anyone faced with a reduction of Medicaid or discontinuance, and that includes if you didn't get your renewal in on time, if you get a notice saying, we're cutting off your Medicaid because you didn't get your renewal in, or you're not eligible, as long as you request that hearing within 60 days, you will get what we call aid continuing. It means they keep your Medicaid on, or whatever it is. Same thing with MLTC. MLTC says, we're reducing your hours. As long as you have to go through the plan appeal, and then as long as you go through the fair hearing, and you have 120 days for MLTC. It's because it used to be, and normally this is just a special thing for this year. Normally you have to request your hearing within 10 days to get aid continuing, to keep your Medicaid on or keep your MLTC. This is a special waiver just for this year. Okay. So request those hearings if right away, if anybody is cut. Report changes of addresses. Clients may move. They don't think of notifying their, local county Medicaid office that they moved, right? They don't think of it, but the Medicaid offices mailed them by snail mail their renewals. So help them report it. The state got a special waiver that the managed care plans and MLTC plans, they can report changes of address. And I hope that they do, because they know where the clients are. They give them home care, right? But, these are all things like advocates like us are really worried about people losing their Medicaid. So moving on to the good news, and that the income limits and asset limits went up a lot this year. And so the income limit went up for age, blind, and disabled. The asset limit went up, and also the Medicare savings programs limit went up a lot. We'll go into some detail. Here are the new limits. You have this nice slide. So if you look at the top, you see 2022. Whoa. I mean, the Medicaid limit, it was shockingly low. I mean, it's just the idea that it was below the poverty line in New York State is such a shame. But now it's 138% of the federal poverty line, the same as it is for younger people through the Affordable Care Act. That was the goal, to have one Medicaid limit and end the age discrimination and disability discrimination that was built into our program. Everybody has the same Medicaid limit. And this was a part of a big coalition working on this, NYLAG, ARP, and Medicare Rights Center. A lot of groups really fought for these, and our state was very supportive about it. The Medicare Savings Program limits also went up. And so just when I say now we have the same income limit for everyone, just to break that down a little, we have two types of Medicaid in New York. There's Magi Medicaid, and that's for the people under 65 who don't have Medicare. And that, remember I showed you that slide with 5 million people getting Medicaid through the New York State of Health? That's them. They have Magi Medicaid. That's from the Affordable Care Act. And that's been almost 10 years now, since 2014. And Magi stands for Modified Adjusted Gross Income because they use a tax methodology to calculate income. And there's no asset limit for Magi Medicaid, none. And that's federal. That's the federal rule. But we, in the non-Magi, age blind and disabled, we were second-class citizens because the income limit plummeted to 82% of the federal poverty line as soon as you turn 65. And you had this strict asset limit. And the Affordable Care Act left this population out. So, but the change in 2023 is that the income limit is the same. I see people taking pictures. You will have access to these slides on the portal. So, and these are questions I get on all this a lot. So does that mean everybody is Magi Medicaid? Magi Medicaid doesn't allow spousal refusal. Is there still spousal refusal? Yes, there's still spousal refusal because it's still non-Magi Medicaid. It's just that the income limit went up. But all the rules that we've used to get people Medicaid are all the same. There's still spousal refusal. There's spousal impoverishment budgeting. There's good favorable rules for anyone who works or if their spouse works, like half their income is disregarded. And that's not true in Magi Medicaid. You can still use a pooled trust to shelter income if it's above the limit. And you still apply the old-fashioned way on a piece of paper application at your local Department of Social Services. You still can't apply online for these. And nursing home budgeting has not changed. It's still, all your money still goes to the nursing home when that doesn't help with that. Just a word about the Medicare Savings Program. If you have clients, even if they don't want Medicaid, that they say, I don't need home care, I have my Medicare, I have my Medigap, I'm good. Well, let's just take a look at your income. Let's just screen them for if they're eligible for the QI1 income limit. Look at that, it went up to $2,260 a month for a single. That's high. Now, what do they get for that? Oh, sorry. Am I going backwards? 106. Oh, sorry. I keep. Okay, sorry. I went the wrong way. I want you to make sure that you know what the MSP, it pays a Part B premium, $164.90 a month. So if even at a $2,000 income limit, that's a good chunk. That's almost 10% of your income. So you do somebody a big favor, getting them that benefit. It also automatically gives them a great subsidy for their Part D plans called Extra Help, and it has some other special benefits, and there's no asset test for the MSP program. So some people may want this alone and don't want Medicaid, and sometimes you want it with Medicaid. and then you just have it with Medicaid. And there's 300,000 people estimated eligible for this program who aren't in it because they don't know about it. So please, make sure you learn about it. There's more work to be done here. Our coalition, we pushed to remove the asset test altogether for the Medicaid program. And we did not get that. And I just want you to understand, why did we push for that? Did we talk about racial justice, racial disparities to healthcare? COVID shined a big bright light on why did so many more people of color die of COVID, especially in nursing homes, right? Because there are racial disparities in access. And Medicaid, these rules are 30, 40, 50 years old, has a lot of discrimination baked into the rules. So yeah, there's an asset limit in Medicaid, but there are exceptions, right? A home is exempt. A home is exempt even if you need long-term care, if it's worth $1 million. Your IRA is exempt as long as you're taking distributions. So you can have a home or an IRA worth $1 million and get Medicaid. But if you have 50,000 in the bank, you're over the asset limit. Now, there are studies that show very clearly that people of color are less likely to own a home for many reasons that go back to a lot of discrimination and redlining and things like that. They're less likely to have an IRA than white people for a lot of reasons, but these are racial disparities in assets. But if they save money, they're more likely to save it in cash, which Medicaid doesn't allow. So these rules favor white people over people of color, and that's why we've moved to change them. We're making progress, but we're not there yet. So now, how do people take advantage of these new limits? There's two ways. They can wait for their renewal. As I said before, people are getting renewed over the course of this year. Once they get renewed, their local Medicaid office will apply the new limits. Or they can go to option 2 and go to your local county, go to DSS and say, hey, I think my spend down will go away under these new limits. Or I'm now eligible for QIMBY, the qualified Medicare beneficiary, and I wasn't before. I'd like it. Because unfortunately, the state, with the antiquated computer system we have, wasn't able to just snap their fingers and rebudget everyone. They tried to, but they couldn't. So instead, we have to do this two-step dance, either wait for your renewal, but as I said, the renewals are happening over a year. So if your client's renewal, and you can estimate when their renewal is going to be, if you find out when their authorization ends, isn't going to happen until next January, then have them ask for rebudgeting now. Okay, so this is more about how you ask for rebudgeting. We're going to go on to the Independent Assessor. That's the new system for assessing home care, an MLTC. So everyone, if you're in this world of MLTC, you knew about the conflict-free system, and that was run by Maximus. But that had one job. Its one job was to assess for whether you're eligible for MLTC. They've expanded that. It has bigger jobs now. It also assesses for whether you can get personal care or CDPAP from your local Medicaid office, because not everybody is eligible for MLTC, or from a mainstream Medicaid managed care plan, because the younger people, all those 5 million people who get Medicaid on the New York State of Health, they don't have Medicare, so they don't join MLTC plans. They get health insurance through what we call mainstream Medicaid managed care plans. 5 million people, it's a lot of people. And those plans are responsible for giving them their personal care and CDPAP. A lot of people don't realize it, including those plans. Because we hear them say, oh, no, you have to go join MLTC, which is not true. Those plans are paid to give the complete suite of Medicaid services, including personal care and CDPAP. So if you hear those plans say, oh, no, you got to go over to MLTC, then that's just not true. You can contact my office if you want chapter and verse. So it's the same company, Maximus, that runs this system, and they have some websites. So not, when I said not everybody gets MLTC, so those columns for who is exempt or who are excluded are, you know, if you've chosen to go get immediate needs services from your local Medicaid office, you're exempt from MLTC for 120 days until you're transitioned to MLTC. If you're in the OPWDD waiver or the nursing home transition waiver or TBI waiver, you're excluded. You can't even join MLTC. So where do or if you're in home hospice, so where do they get their home care? The arrow points to their local district. So they go to the Medicaid office to get personal care or CDPAP. So the big change here is that NYLAG now does those assessments too. That's the big add. It used to be that those local Medicaid offices, their nurses assess the client for personal care. Their nurses assess for CDPAP. Now, no, it's NYLAG nurses. And the same thing with mainstream managed care. NYLAG has replaced it. Now, very important, NYLAG, all right, this is for reference later because there's so many acronyms. I wanted to make sure we didn't miss this slide where you see where you complain about problems with the independent assessor, and they do not know about problems unless you tell them, because they are not doing secret shopper calls. They are not, they've told us they are not calling the NYLAG hotline to see what happens when someone says, I insist on having an in-person assessment. I do not want telehealth. And people are told, no, you can't. Now, some people are getting them. I'm not saying it's not, but they are not. So you need to let them know about problems. So wanted to get to that slide. So what has changed? As I said, this replaces conflict-free. It adds on mainstream managed care and the local DSS. It changes which nurse does the assessments. It's now the NYLAG nurse from Maximus. And there are no more physician's orders. For some services, like especially with the local districts, this is a big change. It used to be we had to put in a physician's order, an M11Q in New York City. That's no longer required because now it's NYLAG that they have a nurse practitioner or physician's assistant do this. They do the physician's order. And so, but I want to make clear that NYLAG is only so far being used for new requests if someone is not getting any personal care or CDPAP or MLTC. So what isn't changing yet at the bottom is that reassessments, the renewals, you're already in MLTC, or you're switching MLTCs. You decided to transfer plans. NYLAG is not involved in that because you were already getting home care. They're only handling new requests. All right. So, all right, I'm going to skip these slides. They're all here because I want to get to the problems. Okay. When you call, you're asking for 2 appointments now, not 1. That's a big change. It used to be just the nurse assessment they call the CHA community health assessment. It's now also the CA, the clinical assessment. Big change. You can't call anymore if your Medicaid application is pending. That you have to have an approved Medicaid application with active Medicaid. That's different than it was with conflict-free, causes delays. They pressure you to accept telehealth, although I'm told in some areas now it's more possible to get an in-person assessment. I want to caution you. So if you want MLTC, if you want personal care from your mainstream plan or your local district, because you're in one of those excluded categories, you call NIA. But if you want immediate need services, do not call NIA. Look at that blue footnote there. You go to your district just like you used to do. And then the district, your Medicaid office, will refer you to NIA through sort of a hot referral. Now, we've had a lot of problems with family members, social workers, care managers calling NIA and say, I want to set up an appointment for my 95-year-old client with dementia. You can't speak for her. Well, what do you mean? I'm her daughter. What do you mean I can't? No, it's confidential. It's private information. I'm not asking for any information. I just want to schedule an appointment. Oh, no. You need to get that 95-year-old woman with dementia on a 3-way call to confirm that she's authorizing you to schedule the appointment. And they have a rep form that if she can't do the 3-way call, you have to submit this rep form, and you have a link for it here, and it's in the appendix in the materials. And we've even had family being asked, well, what's your social security number? I don't want to give you my social security. I'm just calling for my mom. I need your social security number and date of birth. Now, the state did tell us, okay, that was a mistake. We're changing that. But whoops. But they are still insisting on, like, I still don't get it. There's no protected health information being released just by calling to schedule an appointment. I don't know why someone needs a 3-way call. Doesn't make any sense. Big problem is that we're seeing more people being denied MLTC enrollment and denied enough hours. So it's hard to tell why this is happening because, as we said before, that 3 ADL rule is not yet in effect. But we think it's partly due to the fact that these assessments are being done by telehealth, which I'm all for telehealth. I've had many telehealth visits myself with my internist and different doctors. It's all great. But for a 3-hour assessment that goes through all the minutiae of how a person functions in their home, I'm sorry, it's just not appropriate. They need to have their eyes on this consumer and see how do they move around their home. Where is the bathroom from their bed? How far is there room for a commode? This is what home care assessment is. It needs eyes on the consumer. And I'm sorry, the 95-year-old is just not used to using Zoom for telehealth. I mean, it's not workable. So I think that's partly why we're seeing fewer hours. They're just not picking up on the needs. But it's also, when you look at the instructions, and it's there in the portal for you to look at, they tell the nurses to ask for, well, have you had help with bathing and dressing in the last 3 days? Well, no, I haven't. That's why I'm looking for home care. Well, then you're independent. No, I just haven't bathed or dressed in 3 days because I don't have help. You're independent. And you'll see it yourself. You'll look at this. That makes no sense. This is an evidence-based tool, quote unquote. Now, okay, so that doesn't make sense. The fact that the consumer has no way to present people with complex conditions, they want their doctor to present to information. We've asked the state, the regs say that the consumer can present other information. How do they do that? Okay, a state Department of Health spokesperson told us at a meeting, oh, so if you have a letter from your doctor on the telehealth, hold it up to the phone and the nurse will look at it or any other medical records. What? That, okay, I don't have to say anything. The notices are extremely confusing. They say things like, this is two big assessments, 2 sets of professionals. What's the outcome? You may be eligible for community-based long-term social services. Okay. So am I or am I not? The only time you get a yes or no is if you're applying for MLTC. Then they'll say you're eligible for MLTC or you're not. But if you're in one of these you're in mainstream, the state wants the mainstream plan to determine eligibility. So all that NYLAG is saying is your condition is stable enough to get home care. And now the rest is up to mainstream plan. Same thing with the DSS. So it's like, well, what is the big benefit of doing this anyway? If it's just, they're just ducking it to the DSS anyway. For people in mainstream, they have a bunch of other challenges. Read this slide later. We see big problems with them, including that myth I said before of the mainstream plan saying, oh, you got to go to MLTC, which is wrong. There's a thing called a variance, where let's say the nurse doing that job, the assessment, did not pick up on things because they did telehealth or whatever. And they didn't pick up on the client's needs. The MLTC plan can ask for a variance. This is in the regulations, which means a redo, do it again. But the consumer can't ask for a variance. And the consumer doesn't even know, but I'm here to tell you that you can ask the plan to ask for a variance. They all blame each other. The plans say, oh, we can only give you 3 hours a day. That's all I'm allowed to give because that's what the government allows. NYLAG says we don't determine hours. The truth is that NYLAG does not determine the hours. The MLTC plan does, or the local district does, but they do rely on those findings of ADLs that are in the assessment. So if those are wrong, it is going to result in lower hours. There's a lot more information here, and we'll post some more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie.